welcome to Lisa's Home, and my dad listens to this. I'm Juliet, the daughter.
And I'm Kevin, the tired dad.
Well, that's okay, Dad. You could be tired. In fact, you could just let it be. Huh?
Yeah.
We're talking about Let It Be by the Beatles. So, Dad, what do we need to know?
We need to know that it's October 1968. The Beatles, for those of you who don't know, John Lennon, Paul McCartney, George Harrison, and Ringo Starr have just come off 5 months of sessions making The Beatles, also known as the White Album. There were divisions in the band, and Ringo actually quit for 3 weeks. I think 2 weeks and 6 days, it took the rest of them to notice that he was gone. However, the band enjoyed the ensemble playing and the move away from psychedelica. John was happy about it, and so was George. Paul wanted to perform live, something they hadn't done since 1966. He told the press the band would play a live show for subsequent broadcast in a TV special. They were going to book and play at London's Roundhouse, but nothing came of it. Dennis O'Dell, head of Apple Films, suggested the group be filmed at Twickenham Film Studios, rehearsing for their return to live performing. O'Dell had booked the space already to shoot The Magic Christian, starring Peter Sellers and Ringo.
Was that any good?
Never saw it yet. The rehearsal footage would be edited into a short TV documentary to promote the main TV special, in which the Beatles would perform a public concert, maybe even 2. Michael Lindsay Hogg agreed to direct, as he had previously worked with the band. George was away in the U.S. until Christmas, and Ringo was going to start filming for The Magic Christian in February of '69. This left January to get the project done. The schedule was to start rehearsals on January 2nd, have a dress rehearsal on the 18th, and play the shows on January 19th and 20th. And as always, what could possibly go wrong?
Everything.
Well, yeah, first they hadn't picked out a venue, for one. 2, John and Yoko Ono had descended into heroin addiction, and the band decided to perform only new songs, so there was the pressure of coming up with an album's worth of material. John wasn't able to come up with his share, so he distanced himself from the other 3 and scorned Paul's ideas and George's and, well, maybe Ringo's if he had had any. Meanwhile, George was inspired from his United States stay. He jammed with musicians in Los Angeles and was getting along great collaborating with, who else, Bob Dylan and the band. He brought new songs, but guess what? They were dismissed by John and Paul.
Oh, that's nice, George. Let's put it on your fridge with all the other ones.
Big mistake.
Yep.
Also, they hated having to start early, because that's very un-rock and roll.
Yeah.
They thought the cameras and microphones were intrusive and hated the film studio. Things got tense between Paul and George over George's playing on Two of Us, the infamous "I'll play what you want me to play" scene in the movie, and also in Get Back.
Yep.
George and John also got into it when George got on John about the latter's lack of interest with the project. George quit the band on January 10th. Ringo thought Paul's controlling tendencies were a part of George's leaving, but I think John pitched in as well, because he just didn't care.
He's just like, meh, whatever.
Yeah, where's the heroin at? On January 15th, the band met and agreed to George's terms for returning to the band. Abandoned the public concert plan and moved from Twickenham Film Studio to Apple Studios. They'd be filmed there recording the material they had so far for the new album. But there was a delay as John's friend, Magic Alex, had designed crappy recording and mixing equipment. He was this guy who would come up with these really bizarre ideas, but just couldn't bring them to reality.
Cynthia didn't like him that much.
George Martin, to the rescue, borrowed 2 4-track recorders from EMI. He and engineer Glenn Johns, who had worked with the Rolling Stones, got everything ready. I mean, if you can work with the Stones, you can pretty much work with anyone. They started recording on January 21st. Things did improve. George had invited Billy Preston to play keyboards, and if you watch Peter Jackson's Get Back, the rest of the band are on their best behavior because they realized, hey, Billy's going to play with us and we can't waste his time. We got to get it together. Recording and filming finished on January 31st, but before that, on January 30th, the Beatles played their last concert on the rooftop of 3 Seville Row, which housed Apple Corps.
Hey, George, I don't want to go on the roof.
You go and he just didn't want to play.
Yeah.
I mean, John was actually thinking of at one point, he talked to Mick Jagger, and Mick was trying to tell him, the audiences have changed. They'll actually listen to you.
Yeah.
But then Mick said later he kind of realized it was just too late for them.
Yeah.
Okay, so they played for almost 45 minutes when the police showed up to shut it down. And there's one part where they're telling them, you got to unplug stuff, and Mal, I'm helping Evan, starts unplugging stuff, and George just turns around and starts plugging things back in. So after that, Glenn Johns put an acetate together for the band to listen to. John and Paul gave Glenn free rein to compile an album for what they called the Get Back Sessions, because the band was trying to, how do I put this, get back to where they once belonged.
Yeah.
Playing without overdubs, keeping it simple, that sort of thing. Glenn worked from March to May 1969 and completed a master tape. Also, just as an aside, the cover for the proposed Get Back album was going to be an update of the Please Please Me album cover, the one when they're standing on that balcony and they're all looking down.
Oh, yeah, and that's used on the Blue album.
Yeah, you can find those photos on the Red and Blue album, 62 to 66 and 67 to 70. Anyway, in December 1969, the Beatles told Glenn Johns to try again. And once again, he tried, and once again, the Beatles rejected it, and the songs just sat on the shelf. Now, meanwhile, before all that, back in April of 69, Get Back was released as a single with Don't Let Me Down as the B-side. And before that, right after the Get Back session, starting in February of 69, the Beatles remembered that, hey, we're the Beatles, for God's sake, and recorded what's really their final album, Abbey Road, which was released before Let It Be.
Yeah.
But now it's 1970, and John and George invite Phil Spector to see if he can salvage the Get Back material. The movie was coming out soon, and they thought, should be an album to go along with it. Phil did his Wall of Sound thing, and Paul hated it, especially what Phil did to The Long and Winding Road, which now had orchestral and choral accompaniment.
We'll get into that in a bit.
Oh, we will. John defended it in his Rolling Stone interviews when the band broke up, saying, and I quote, "He was given the shittiest load of badly recorded shit and with a lousy feeling to it, ever. And he made something out of it. He did a great job. When I hear it, I didn't puke."
Also, we don't know what those original acetate tapes sounded like, so John could be right with that one.
Well, John and George would both go on to use Phil for some of their early albums. But I think the thing with those albums is John and George had a lot more control over Phil than Phil had over them.
Yes, they did.
Yes, they did.
Otherwise, All Things Must Pass would have been, oh God, I don't even want to think about it.
All things must pass gas. Anyway, John chose not to credit Glenn Johns for his production contributions. EMI also told George Martin, guess what? You're not going to be getting a producer credit, as Phil produced the final version. And George Martin had the best comeback.
What?
I produced the original. What you should have is a credit saying, produced by George Martin, overproduced by Phil Spector.
Okay, that's good. Yep.
That is. In May of 1970, after the Beatles had broken up, in most countries except for the United States, Let It Be was issued as a box set. And God knows how much that's worth now. It had an LP and a full-color book. And we here in the U.S. just got a gatefold cover. It opens, it closes, it opens again, it closes again. That's all it does. Now, as for the cover, it presented the Fab Four separately. Before that, it was always a group photo for the cover.
Yeah.
And the individual covers were all bordered in black, so you knew it was definitely
It's
over.
over.
In bonus, George is the only one smiling on the cover.
Yeah, because he's like, all right, it's over. I can write my own stuff. Yay!
And I checked the back cover too, and doggone it, still the only one smiling.
Yay! More songs for me on my albums.
Yep,
Yay! No
yep.
more 2 per album.
Yep. Now they'll be really sorry.
Yeah, I'm gonna be the first Beatle post-breakup to have a #1 hit, and also the last one to have a #1 hit. So screw you and the horse that brought you.
That's a hell of a career bookend.
Yep.
Anyway, reviews weren't that great, but the album went to #1, and Let It Be and The Long and Winding Road also hit #1. And it won a Grammy in 1971 for Best Original Score written for a motion picture or television special.
Okay, fine.
Paul, being Paul, actually showed up to pick up the hardware because he's very polite.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, Let It Be also won an Oscar for Best Original Song Score.
Really?
Yep. Quincy Jones accepted that on behalf of the band. In 2003, Paul initiated a remix called Let It Be ... Naked, basically removing Phil's glop. It was mixed and produced by Paul Hicks, Guy Massey, and Alan Rouse. And I think I got my copy at a library sale for $1.
Nice.
It was. In 2021, Let It Be was remastered for its 50th anniversary. A tad late due to COVID.
Well, you know,
Yeah.
that's understandable.
You could get the 1-disc version, the 2-disc version, or like Paul got, the 5-disc box.
Well, Paul's a super fan, so...
And I was actually able to borrow that from the library because disc 4 was the Get Back LP with Glyn John's mix.
Mm-hmm.
So it is available out there. And so I downloaded that disc. Now, as for the original vinyl, I think I borrowed it from the library back in the late 70s or very early 80s and taped it and listened to it a lot. Because that was when I first was starting out with the Beatles, and it's like, they're the greatest band ever. They can't do anything wrong. Nothing.
Oh, sorry, Dad.
Okay. Also, the film was re-released around that time, and I went to see it at the Four Seasons, and that was the first time I ever walked out of a movie feeling depressed.
Just seeing.
Because it was just no fun at
Well,
all.
we're going to talk about the Get Back of it all, though, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I will admit, it's not my favorite Beatles album, and yet I have it in my collection, maybe from all those times of listening to it over and over when I was young. But another reason, I think, is because, I have all their other albums, so, have to have a complete set. And for Let It Be on CD, I do have the 2009 remaster, and this was the first time I listened to it on headphones for doing the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to admit, it sounds damn good.
It does sound good on headphones.
It does.
Mm-hmm.
So let us jump into this.
Oh, yes, let's. First track, Two of Us. This is such a soothing nostalgia trip for an opening. I see this song as being about John and Paul's friendship when they were younger, memories of being lads in Liverpool, wasting away the day, and someone else's money they got pocket money for, but having a great time. It's just their voices with acoustic guitar and Ringo getting one kick-ass drum moment. A simple Beatles song that gets you in a comfortable mood.
Mm-hmm. Now, originally, I never knew this. Paul wrote this about his and Linda's travels.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, I was kind of disappointed because I always thought it was about John and Paul
Me
when
too.
they were kids. And
Yeah.
I still think that. Paul, you're wrong on this one. Even though, you wrote it.
Yeah.
I mean, the two of us riding nowhere, spending someone's hard-earned pay, like what kids do to their parents' money, right?
Yeah.
Right. Until they're old enough to work and earn their own money.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, I think there's a reference to the two of them trying to deal with Alan Klein, you and me chasing paper, getting nowhere, which Paul would be more explicit on Abbey Road. Would you never give me your money? You only give me your funny paper. Yeah. Anyway, John and Paul are both playing acoustic guitars, and George is playing the bass on his 6-string guitar. And Ringo, well, drums, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
The playing is bare bones, and so is the production. Phil hasn't put his thumb on the scale yet.
Not yet.
He's having a light touch.
Next track, Dig a Pony. Okay, my first note. The opening was so bad I thought this was a Paul song. Then I googled it, read that John wrote it for Yoko, and it all made sense. It feels like, and this is just the vibe I'm getting, I hate you, and I frustrate you, and you frustrate me, but damn it, woman, I want you. Like he's mocking her viciously, but also writing a musical ballad. And I want to slap the guy. Dump her or bed her. Pick one or the other, and don't put us through this hell of musical limbo. Just a song where I want to throttle John Lennon for being an indecisive asshole. It's not cute at any age.
Well, also there's the combo platter. Bed, then dump.
Yeah. Oh, God, like this one guy I went to college with his 3-week system.
Was the name Dennis? Okay.
No, not his name wasn't Dennis, but it was like...
Oh, that would have been perfect.
First week, you get to know the girl. Second week, you do the fun stuff. You do all the sexual stuff. Then the third week, you slowly let her down gently and break her up. But by the time you're in the third week with her, you're in the first week with someone else.
Was this Evil Mitch?
No, this was not Evil Mitch. This was
Wow.
somebody else
Okay.
who went to West Point.
Yeah. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I just have a feeling this is John doing his Bob Dylan imitation, just writing a bunch of words that may or may not anything. And John himself actually called this a piece of garbage.
Well, at least he admits it.
And I got to credit you for like coming up with that insight because I've lived with this song for, oh God, what in 2024, more than 40 years, and I still don't know what it's about. And I think I kind of have to agree with John lyrically. I mean, yeah, definitely it's not one of his best songs, but I wouldn't go so far as to call it a piece of garbage. I would call it a forerunner to Come Together. Another one of those songs that don't make sense, but Come Together definitely rocks a lot harder than Dig a Pony. And that's Ringo yelling, "Hold it" at the beginning. I don't know if you heard that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, what happened was he was putting out a cigarette with one hand and had both drumsticks in his right hand.
Oh, no.
And we know he's a lefty.
So he's going to put out the cigarette.
Yeah, I'm smoking left, but playing right. And once again, Phil has a light touch with this song. Go figure.
Next track, Across the Universe. Okay. The first version of this song I ever heard was Fiona Apple's cover on Joan of Arcadia, where Joan attends the funeral of a little boy she used to babysit, and she sees the boy's spirit waving goodbye to her and running happily through the graveyard. It's also used in the scene where her friend Adam is read the letter his mom left him after she killed herself, and it says that in a world of pain, he was the only joyful part of her life.
Oh.
And theater kids know this song from the Julie Taymor movie of the same name. I think this is the song where we hear how George's spirituality influenced John, because in my opinion, George was so certain about his spiritual path once he converted to Hinduism, and John seemed unsure and discovering, so this is him trying to make sense of it. But I don't feel at peace with his songs exploring the universe the way I do with George. Maybe it's easier to be at peace when you're more certain of the path you're on. And hey, I like the key Fiona sings in better anyway. As for Bowie's, his is definitely more soulful, and he sounds more in pain contemplating it all. But this is the cover that makes you understand why he was the first white artist on Soul Train who got name dropped by Parliament. Not my favorite cover, though. I'm going to be biased to the one I heard first.
Okay. Yeah, this was first recorded in February of 1968 for a charity album for the World Wildlife Fund. Believe it or not. This was right before the Beatles left for India to meet Sexy Sadie, the Maharishi. Yeah. So, it definitely has the taint of transcendental meditation. Yeah, Come and Get Me, Beach Boy Mike Love, also known as the world's angriest practitioner of TM. Yeah, so, yeah, I think being recorded before going to India, John was probably hoping that, yeah, maybe this is the answer, and then wah, it wasn't. They recorded it again in January 1969, obviously, as part of the Get Back sessions. For Let It Be, Phil just went total Phil. Choir, cellos, violas, harp, violins, trombones, and trumpets. And John thought it was some of the best lyrics he had ever written, and I say he was entitled to his opinion. As Grandpa Simpson would say, unadulterated pap. Anyway, yeah, Bowie did record this for the Young Americans album.
Yep.
And John actually played guitar on it. And
yep.
he liked Dave's version better than the Beatles version.
Yeah.
And you know what? He's right. But critics hate it though. I think because they thought that
is he doing too much maybe? Is that what they thought?
I think they thought it's not really a soul song. Like it didn't fit in well with the rest of Bowie's blue-eyed soul moves on Young Americans.
Well, too bad.
But I really like it because he did something different with it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wow, this is really good. This is officially my favorite version. I listened to Fiona Apple's version, the whole version.
Yeah.
That from Pleasantville.
Yeah, yeah.
With the guys in the back behind her are trashing the candy shop.
Mm-hmm.
And, I mean, she brings nothing new to the song like Bowie did, and she's got her Fiona voice going on.
But I think if you get a female artist who knows what to do with that song in that key, it can sound really, really good. Yeah, especially if they put more effort into it.
Nothing's gonna change my mind about this song.
Okay, except Bowie.
Yeah,
That's it.
I just respect that guy even more.
Give credit where credit's due, Dad.
I just did.
Next track, I Me Mine.
Yours?
No, I Me Mine.
Oh.
Yeah. My first note for this one. This opening rocked so hard I thought it was a Paul song. You get what I mean, though, right?
No.
All right, never mind. But it's not. It's George. Good old George. And I say that like, and good old Trusty. Hey, he's my favorite. I can make those jokes. Anyway, I personally see this song as being about a mantra of self-centeredness and selfishness, because he does repeat the title over and over the same way you'd repeat a mantra while meditating. And then Paul joining in shows we all think this way. Some of us from time to time, others pretty much every day. A rocking song that makes you think, but not one of my George favorites.
This is George's pronoun song, and it was also the very last song the Beatles worked on before breaking up. Well, John had already left, so it's just Paul, George, and Ringo. And Phil loaded up on this one. Violins, violas, cellos, harps, trumpets, trombones. Phil also extended the song by repeating the chorus and the second verse, and George was present for that.
Okay.
So he didn't have a problem. George said he kept coming across the words I, me, and mine in books about yoga and, quote, and stuff, unquote. I, me, mine is all about ego orientation.
Yep.
The verses bemoan the ego, but the chorus just doesn't care. It's just I, me, mine over and over. It's like a sort of battle.
The ego and the id.
Yep. And the verses, if you notice, they're in waltz time.
Yeah, they are.
But the choruses, or the chori, they just flat out rock. And I think it's probably one of the best songs on here. But the Glyn Johns produced Get Back version is a lot better because it's just more stripped down.
Next track, Dig It. Yeah, there's no point to this one. It's 50 seconds long and it means nothing. It's credited to all four of them, but I can't help but feel that this is John satirizing protest songs. Although them saying, and now we'd like to do Hark the Angels Come, is actually a perfect transition to the title track due to how Paul came to write it.
This is an excerpt from a 15-minute jam at Apple Studio in January 69.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
We didn't need this. Oh.
Well, they didn't put the whole 15 minutes on.
No, but we don't need a
that's
snippet of it. We don't need it at all.
Well, but that's how you get songs. You just keep playing until something comes out.
Yeah, but that's something this isn't necessarily good.
That's true.
So they could have just put it.
It fades in and lasts for 51 seconds. Now, there's a 4-minute, 10-second version on Get Back.
No.
The under 1-minute version is a lot better.
Yeah, no, both of them are bad.
Eventually, they get to this point. But I gotta say, Phil knew what he was doing on this one. He picked the best section and just went with it.
You shouldn't have picked any of it.
I don't
have just thrown it out.
I don't have
Thrown
a
it out.
problem. I don't have a problem.
Well, good for you. You can keep this song.
So, do you like this song?
What do you think?
I think you don't dig it.
Next track.
Sorry.
Let It Be.
Oh,
Okay.
boy.
Okay. In case you're one of the few people on the planet who doesn't know the origin story, in sum, Paul was really going through it as the Beatles were starting to split, and he had a dream about his mom saying, "It'll be okay, let it be." I think what people can miss is hearing how much of an emotional catharsis this song was for Paul. Not catharsis in the sense he's screaming at the top of his lungs, but in the sense he seems calm and at peace here, although he does get a rock and guitar solo briefly. This could also be interpreted as a protest song, or even a hymn in the vein of Buddhist philosophy or Taoist philosophy detachment, which I'm sure scholarly articles have been written about this song before. But at the end of the day, it's about a boy who received advice from his mom at a moment he needed it most, and you feel the love and gratitude for her in this song.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in 1968, during the tense recording sessions for the White Album, Paul did have a dream about his mother, named, of course, Mary. Mm-hmm. She had died in 1956 from cancer, and Paul said, "It was great to visit with her again. I felt very blessed to have that dream. So that got me writing Let It Be." In another interview, he said in the dream his mother told him, "It will be all right. Just let it be." To which I say, okay. Anyway, during rehearsals, Paul not only sang Mother Mary, but Brother Malcolm in reference to
Malcolm X?
Mal Evans.
Oh, oops.
Mal, short for Malcolm.
Okay.
There you go. Hey, here's a fun fact. Aretha Franklin's version of Let It Be came out first in January of 1970 because
Oh.
Paul had sent a demo to Jerry Wexler at Atlantic Records, and he passed it on to Aretha.
Oh, I haven't heard Aretha's
So there
version.
you go. The Beatles version came out in March of 1970, and it hit #1 in a dozen countries, including the United States. Okay, so bear with me on this. The Beatles recorded what seems like 875 versions of Let It Be,
Oh, jeez.
of which I have 4. The Let It Be album version, the Get Back version, the Let It Be Naked version, and the Past Masters single version.
Oh, my God.
And yes, there are differences with all 4 of them.
Uh,
Well, basically, it's like Paul's voice has more echo on the Get Back and the single versions. George's guitar solo is more in your face on the Get Back and Let It Be album versions. And Ringo's drumming is more stripped down on the Get Back and Let It Be Naked versions. Because Phil had added tom-toms and shaker overdubs on the other 2, which Ringo did not like. And Ringo said, when Let It Be Naked came out, he said, quote, he'd have to listen to Paul say, I told you so, when talking about Phil's production. Like, damn it, Paul was right. Now, get this. In 1983, Sesame Street came out with Let Her Be by the Beatles, spelled like the Bugs themselves. And guess what? They got sued for $5.5 million.
no.
Not from the Beatles,
Oh,
but from Northern Songs, because some rich Netherlands millionaire, had bought the Beatles catalog.
oh, yeah, they don't own it. That's right.
Now, then Michael Jackson got his hands on the catalog. He thought the lawsuit was ridiculous,
Yeah, it's stupid.
and he settled out of court for $50.
Oh, okay.
Well, plus the thing is,
Yeah.
the guy who wrote the song said, we knew we were going to win this case because it's fair use to do a parody. It's like
Yeah,
Weird Al
exactly.
doesn't get sued, but Weird Al goes the extra step of contacting the artist
And
saying,
asking permission.
hey, I want to do this. Can I do this? And if they say yes, which 99% of them do, fine, he does it. If you're Prince,
No.
you're not going to do it. But we saw what happened to Prince. Weird Al got his revenge. Oh, yeah.
Dad, no, don't spread that conspiracy theory.
Do not mess with Weird Al. Okay? Just do not. Okay, you can find the Beatles version on YouTube, of course, and the credits are priceless. Song Let Her Be, artist The Beatles, from the album Sesame Road on Lemon Records. As for me, it's an okay song.
Okay.
There was only one time in my life that I really liked it.
When was that?
It's 1977. I'm about to get out of St. Margaret's for good.
Oh, no.
Somehow we managed to have a dance at the Knights of Columbus Hall, I think.
Okay.
Like, we decided, the class as a whole, like, hey, let's have a dance or something. The nuns went BS on it.
Mm-hmm.
And even though we were going to have chaperones and everything,
Yeah.
and they're like, no, you're not. And the parents who were the chaperones said, oh, yes, they are.
Yeah.
And we did. Anyway, I'm not really sure who was in charge of the music. It definitely was not me.
Mm-hmm.
But someone put on Let It Be, and the first thing I thought was, oh, no, not this song. But then classmate Nicole LaRoe came up to me and asked me to dance with her. So I did.
Hi, Nicole, if you're out there. Probably not.
And I was able to tolerate the song. So,
Okay.
Nicole, if you are out there, thank you very much. I still appreciate it after almost 50 years.
Aw.
Yeah.
Next track, Maggie May. I didn't have the thought that this could be cut until the ending. Basically, this woman robs a sailor, and that's it. If the Beatles believed in bonus tracks, this would have been a fun one, or maybe even as a hidden track, but by itself, we don't need it.
Well, this is a traditional Liverpool song from the 1700s about, yes, a prostitute who robs a sailor coming home from a round trip. And all 4 Beatles are credited as arrangers, and they took the extra step of respelling May from M-A-Y to M-A-E. This allowed them to collect the writer's share of publishing income for a public domain song. Very smart. Very, very smart financial move. And yes, Maggie May, the folk song, inspired Rod Stewart's Maggie May. And anyway, Paul, as Uncle Jack, sings Maggie May in 2017's Pirates of the Caribbean Dead Men Tell No Tales.
Yep.
It's
That
an okay
works.
song.
Yeah.
I mean, they're paying tribute to their Liverpool roots, so, I'm not going to fault them for that. And that is the end of side 1,
Okay,
which is
kid.
kind of like, It's almost like you're getting like the Abbey Road treatment of, you've got that song, The End, and then they tack on,
Her Majesty.
then we got Let It Be, and then they tack on Maggie May. You're like, wait, what?
Well, listen, we all know that the end is the true ending. It's like, yes, Her Majesty exists, but we don't count that one.
I do.
Okay, fine. Okay, kids, time to turn the record over. Next track, I've got a feeling.
You do?
Oh, yeah, I feel things. My first note, man, what happened to this Paul? I mean, I'm still kind of annoyed with him because it's another Paul Needs to Rock Out song, but at least when he rocked out, it was interesting. And this is interesting because I thought it would be Paul all the way through, but John kind of gets to sing the bridge part, which is fun. And then when they play off each other lyrically, it's a nice balance that they strike. Paul leaning into his lower register with a rocky edge and John keeping his voice light. Plus the guitar strumming with the ascending chords, the bass drum, and the piano playing create a nice musical build before the song finishes. Lyrically, I'm bored, but musically, I'm jamming.
Okay. Now, this is a true Lennon and McCartney composition. You know why?
Because they sang half of it?
Because it combines two of their songs.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Paul's I've Got a Feeling and John's Everybody Had a Hard Year. And I think it rocks, and production-wise, Phil keeps his pedal off the metal. And one thing he does is he has Billy Preston's Fender Rhodes piano on the left channel and George's guitar playing on the right, and you can hear them clearly, and it makes a difference. And I've never really listened to Paul's lyrics beyond I've Got a Feeling, so maybe that's an advantage for me. I don't know, but I really like that song.
Next track, One After 909.
That would be 910?
Yes. This feels like the Beatles paying tribute to the American rock groups of the 50s they grew up listening to, especially with the musical arrangement and how they sing Move Over Once, Move Over Twice. And then we get Danny Boy at the end for some reason, because John just wants to be John. But this is a really fun Beatles song to dance to, and I really love the tribute they made here.
Yep, this song actually dates back to 1960. John wrote most of it, and Paul put in his 2 cents. And they also first recorded it in 1960 as the Quarrymen, then again in 1963 as the Beatles. But they weren't happy with it at that time, but eventually it got re-released in 1995 on the Anthology 1 compilation. Paul said it wasn't a great song, but it's still a favorite of his, as it reminded him of himself and John in the early days trying to write a train song, which apparently was a thing back then. And yeah, it definitely owes a bit to early rock and roll. It definitely does. Yeah, because if you take out Billy Preston's electric piano playing, which please don't, because it's really good, it sounded like it came right out of the 50s. And Paul and John actually sound like they're having fun on this one, which was very rare.
Yeah. Next track, The Long and Winding Road. I bet that this was the track that planted the seed in the Broccoli's minds to have Paul write something for the Bond films because of the big sweeping sound. Okay, Dad, how many people do you want to bet use this as a wedding song after only hearing the first part and not paying attention to the rest?
All of them.
This song is just beautiful. There's no other adjective for it. It's a beautiful ballad that shows the Beatles couldn't be placed in one mold. It's Paul at his most heartbreakingly sincere without phoning it in. This track is peerless.
Paul came up with the title during one of his visits to High Park Farm in Scotland, which he bought in 1966. He saw a road stretching up into the hills that was long and, yes, winding. And the road's official title is B842. Paul wrote the lyrics in 1968, quote, imagining it was going to be done by someone like Ray Charles, unquote. And Ray did record his own version in 1971.
Oh, I'd have loved to have heard that one.
Meanwhile, back in 1969, the Beatles record The Long and Winding Road at Twickenham Film Studios. John plays a 6-string bass on this one. Again, in Get Back, Paul brought up the idea of it being a Ray Charles song and wanted to add, and I quote, a bit of brass, a bit of strings. Just a bit. Just a bit.
Well, yeah, more than a bit.
Yeah, in 1970, Phil Spector added quite a bit. He added a lot of brass and string. Get this. 8 violins, 4 violas, 4 cellos, 3 trumpets, 3 trombones, 2 guitars, a choir of 14 women, and a partridge in a pear tree.
Holy shit.
Yeah. And I guess he really tried the patience of all those people because it was, can we do this again? Can we do this again? I'm trying to get this sound. It's in my head and I don't hear it yet. Phil sent John, Paul, George, and Ringo each an acetate of the finished album with a note basically saying, hey, if they wanted anything done, to call him. All 4 of them sent Phil a telegram giving their approval.
Mm-hmm.
At the time, Paul, being Paul, felt the need to accommodate the other three when accepting Phil's version of Let It Be, because sometimes he can be just too nice.
Mm-hmm.
He's a people pleaser.
Mm.
However, once the Beatles were broken up, he let his true feelings be known.
Oh, God.
As for Phil, Phil said he was forced I say, into orchestrating.
Yeah, sure, pal.
He said it was to cover up John's poor bass playing. Now, anyway, The Long and Winding Road was released as a single on May 11th, 1970, and it went to #1 on Billboard's Hot 100 chart. It became their 20th and final #1 hit. And now get this, they hold the record for most #1s, with Mariah Carey at #2 with
Wow.
19 #1s. Now, here's the thing, though. It only took them 6.5 years to achieve that. And get this, back in 1964, I'm sorry, I'm going Billboard chart trivia geek here. They replaced themselves at #1 with 3 different songs. I Want to Hold Your Hand, which was their first #1, which was #1 for 7 weeks. Then She Loves You replaced that at #1 for 2 weeks. And then finally, Can't Buy Me Love replaced that and stayed at #1 for 5 weeks. Now, if you average out their #1s, get this, they were hitting the very top once every 6 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah. Now, as for me, I've never really been a fan of this song. It's kind of like Let It Be Part 2.
I don't see it as that.
I kind of do. I mean, just, I think Phil-wise, just with all the
Okay.
stuff on it. And now here's the thing. I have 3 different versions. And if I would be forced to pick one, I'd have to go with the Let It Be Naked version because it's just so stripped down. It's just the 4 of them. That's it. Phil's Let It Be version is just so over the top. And the version on Get Back just comes across as more like a demo. It's just unfinished.
Next track, For You, Blue. Whoever came up with the order for this album did George dirty to go from that sweeping ballad to this. And the mixing for this is all wrong because the instruments are louder than George's voice and he's up at his high falsetto, which isn't strong, so he's gonna sing it softly. It's not my favorite George song, but I gotta wonder, is it because the mixing is so shitty? Because Paul sings it at concert for George and the sound mixing for that concert was fine. But this is so bare bones. I'm like, oh man, this track makes me so sad because George deserved better. God damn it. I mean, mine was perfectly done, and then there's this. No wonder you wanted to quit the band. I'd want to as well if I heard what they did to this song. It just makes me so angry and depressed and sad.
Yeah, but I mean, you know, he was a Phil guy. He was a Phil booster. Obviously, George wrote this one about Patty Boyd, who was Patty Harrison, who would go on to be
Patty Clapton,
and probably is back to Patty Boyd now.
Yeah,
he wrote it as a 12-bar blues, and according to quote George, except it's happy-go-lucky. And it was released as the B-side to Long and Winding Road, but it got a lot of airplay, and Billboard wound up listing that and the Long and Winding Road as a double A-sided hit.
The Long and Winding Road.
Winding. Anyway, yeah, okay, anyway. This song is okay, I guess. I mean, we've all known that George has done a lot better. This is kind of like a trifle.
Yeah.
And John's slide guitar is interesting, but other than that, meh. But then
George was the king of slide guitar.
Right after this,
Uh-huh.
George came up with something, and Here Comes the Sun. Like,
Yeah.
okay, guys, this is how it's done. And even John and Paul had to admit that. Yeah, it's kind of a lot better than what we came up with.
Yeah.
And then he comes out with All Things Must Pass.
Yep.
And you realize the quiet one was quietly stockpiling.
Yep. Yes,
and
he was.
I think for Let It Be, he kind of realized, okay, you know, I'm coming to them with these great songs, and they're saying no. So I'm just going to give them stuff that maybe I really don't care that much about what
and
they
I'll save
do
the good
with.
stuff for my debut.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Now I gotta listen to All Things Must Pass
He's the
again.
evil genius of the band.
Yeah, he is. Final track, Get Back. This was originally supposed to be a protest song about Harold Wilson's treatment of immigrants coming from Pakistan.
Ooh, you're so close.
Is it not Pakistan?
No, it's Enoch Powell. We'll get into that.
Okay, I would love to hear a cut of that version if it's floating around in the ether somewhere, because Paul only really got political during Blackbird. As for the final version, the chatter at the beginning could have been cut, but the rest of the song is a good steady groove I can bob my head to, and I do like the inclusion of the audience interaction with the roof concert at the end. There's also a possible reference to a trans character with Loretta, which surprised me.
Get Back was a song that grew out of jam sessions, and I guess if you watch the Peter Jackson's documentary, you can see the whole thing being created like through different sessions, I suppose.
And Paul having to double the British people saying, "Is Tucson, Arizona even a real place?" Which I thought was funny. Yeah, they were like, "Oh, what's that?" And I guess Paul knew because he's dating an American girl at the time. So
I thought that's where I'm going to retire. Anyway, Paul only had the "Get Back to Where You Once Belong" line written, and that was it. Now, this is great. In John Lennon's 1980 Playboy interview, John said he thought that this was directed at Yoko because every time Paul sang that line, he looked at her.
Oh, no.
That could just be John paranoid, but if it's not, I really want that to be true. I really do. I don't care. Come and get me, Yoko fans. All two of you. For the verses, Paul came up with like temporary lyrics, like what do they call those? Like fill-in lyrics?
Fillers?
Or just filler, yeah. Which became known as
placeholders,
which became known as the No Pakistanis version. And they had parodied MP, which I found out means Member of Parliament, Enoch Powell's anti-immigrant Rivers of Blood speech, which is quite the thing. I mean, he gave a speech and then everyone just backed away and said, I don't know that guy.
Yeah, the Brits like to pretend that they're not racist because of how polite they are, but they really are.
And eventually Paul's muse took over and he figured out Tucson, Arizona is the place we ought to be. Anyway, the Beatles recorded what seems like, yes, again, another 875 versions of Get Back because I have 4 of them. The single version, the Let It Be version, the Let It Be Naked, and the Get Back version. And this is where things get thorny. So just try and bear with me as I try to sort this out. The single has a false ending and a coda. Now, the main part of the song was recorded on January 27, 1969, and the coda was recorded on the 28th.
Yep.
Now, in April, Paul and Glyn Johns worked together to take the best take from each day and edit them together, which kind of put to bed the let's keep it simple approach that the Get Back sessions were supposed to be. But hey, they did a really good job. It does sound seamless. The Let It Be version doesn't have a coda. There's no false ending because it's part of the rooftop performance. It just ends with applause. Paul saying, thanks, Mo, acknowledging Maureen Starkey's cheering. She was the pre-Barbara Bach. Yep. And John's famous line, I want to say thank you on behalf of the group and ourselves, and I hope we pass the audition. I'm sorry for my bad John imitation. If Andy was here, he'd nail it perfectly. Yep. The Let It Be Naked version just ends. There's no false ending, no coda, no nothing. And that was just a take from January 27th. And the Get Back version is a different take to the single version. Probably one of the ones Paul and Glyn experimented with, but they came up with something better. All the versions are great. And Ringo is just killing it on the drums. Like you got to keep your eye on him because every once in a while he just comes up with like these unexpected drum patterns, and you just go, "Wow, this is great." And then you try and play it, and you realize, "Wow, okay, this. I have to work at this." And in a way, they did get back to where they belong to on their next album, Abbey Road. Like I said earlier, they remembered who they were, and they put out a masterpiece. But I think if the albums had been able to be released chronologically, Abbey Road would be looked on as even more of a masterpiece, having to follow Let It Be. But overall, there's a sloppiness to most of the Let It Be songs, which the guys may have tried to equate with keeping things simple and loose in their efforts to get back to basics. But I think they should have gone back and listened to everything from Please Please Me to Help, because they might have realized, oh yeah, we could do basic, but we could also be tight.
And now, a crisis. Here's the thing. Almost all the albums in the Beatles catalog are bangers. Even if you don't vibe with all the songs, you recognize the craftsmanship that went into making this happen. And Let It Be is a solid, it's fine. Like, it's the Beatles being mediocre, low quality. And I'm not used to the Beatles being mid. I'm used to them kicking ass and taking names. I also forget that this album exists all the time. Like, I'm gonna listen to Let It Be, then put it down and forget about it all over again. If it wasn't for the most famous tracks, this album would be totally forgettable, and George, I'm so sorry. Not your best, but then we got Here Comes the Sun and Something Afterwards. And that's when I realized this is the Beatles purge their crap before they write Abbey Road album. And the songs aren't even that crappy. They're mid, but the Beatles shouldn't be mid, and now I'm caught in a cycle. Point is, this isn't my go-to Beatles album, but unlike my other non-go-to of the White Album, it's more forgettable.
Huh, okay.
Ugh.
Yeah, all in all, this for the Beatles is their worst album, with worst being a relative term, because I think a lot of bands out there would give anything to have an album like this.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like you look at the Beatles and it's like,
Really?
yeah, but I think you brought up a good point. It was kind of like they had to go to the bathroom, and then they put out, okay, we're going to the bathroom with Let It Be, but when we come out, we're going to do Abbey Road.
Yeah.
Okay. It's not my favorite of them, but for some reason, I have 3 different versions of this album. But then it hit me that I also have 3 versions of Revolver, their best album. So make of that what you will. I know, I will. I have a lot of thinking to do now.
Yeah. Oh, man.
I know. The thing is, I think it was like, once I heard like Paul, commissioned the Let It Be Naked, I thought, okay, I'm really going to hear what these songs were supposed to sound like. And then when they did the 50th anniversary and it was, the Glenn Johns production, I thought, okay,
Now
I have
really
to
gonna
hear
hear.
that because he did good work with the Stones. And like I said before, if you can work with the Stones, you can work with anyone.
Yeah.
Okay, do you want to do your usual spiel?
Yeah, sorry listeners to end it on this note, but we're kind of going through a crisis right now. We need to wrap this up. Alright, as always, thank you for listening to the latest element. My dad listens to this. Like, comment, subscribe, and all that jazz. Remember, the more you interact with the video, the greater chance we have of appearing on the YouTube homepage. If you follow me on social media, I post the episodes there. If you're friends with my dad, tell him what you want to listen to, and he'll email it right to your inbox. As always, thank you for listening to the latest album. My dad listens to this. It feels like this was the first album in a while we nitpicked and griped about, but we'll be back next time with another album to nitpick and gripe about. Dad, anything you want to say before we sign off?
Can we just let it be, please?